Hello, everyone. My name is Julian Gau, and I serve as music director of the Horizon Ensemble. I'm here today with composer Rainier Potgieter, whose piece h.a.g.s, Countess Báthory smiley face we're doing on our concert Visions of Youth. This happens on Sunday, November 9th at 3 o'clock. How are you doing today?
Yeah, not too bad. Thanks for having me. How are you, Julian?
I'm good. It's a busy week leading up to the show next weekend, but we're very excited and rehearsals are going just smoothly. So I'd like you to just tell us about yourself. What would you like to say about where you come from, your background, and your compositions?
Yeah. Okay, what is there to say? I'm from New York. I don't know how much that necessarily says about me. I think it probably um, becomes more apparent the longer you get to know me, maybe. But yeah, I call myself an alleged composer sometimes, more, I think, for, uh, a slower output rather than uh, ideas about my ability or anything like that. But yeah, I write music that I put my heart and soul into, and try to give it my all. Outside of music, I love soccer, and that's pretty much, there's a lot more to me, but those I think are the bullet points.
Okay. I'm from New Jersey, which is not so far, so hooray, Mid Atlantic.
Yeah.
Technically not New England. When I was a kid, I thought New England was every single one of the 13 colonies, so I didn't understand why I wasn't in New England, but now I get it. I didn't know you liked soccer. I went to Foxborough recently in Massachusetts, and the commuter rail doesn't go there during most of the time, so I had to bike there from Mansfield. It was a hassle. And as for composition, don't worry. I write very occasionally, so you probably write more than I do, and it takes me forever. So, speaking of writing, we're about to play your piece, Hags, H.a.g.s, Countess Bathory, Smiley Face. It's a very intriguing piece. It's been fun to put together. It's very meditative. What can you tell us about the inspiration behind this work?
Yeah, so the main catalyst for the piece was I needed to write an orchestra piece to graduate for my master's degree. So that's what brought it on. Um, but as far as inspiration goes, I've become more and more interested in creating these sort of reflective, introspective atmospheres, um, as well as trying to incorporate and explore a lot of different colors throughout an ensemble or a single instrument. And the orchestra is the most diverse ensemble we have. I think fairly often we get a lot of rep that plays it safe and goes for what is proven to sound good. I think we can maybe be a little more adventurous at times. So the kind of initial conception, once I got past the stage of I need to come up with an idea for an orchestra piece in order to graduate, um, was inspired a lot actually by, in my orchestration course, we talked about Henry Brandt's methodology for orchestration. Not to get too like lingo-y or like too in the weeds with all the kind of technical music school curriculum stuff, but a lot of the time we learn out of the Samuel Adler textbook, which is a great starting resource. Yeah, I'm sure it's on the shelf. It's on
Somewhere,
it's on
somewhere in the room. Yeah, I
it's
have
on
it.
my shelf too. It's a good starting point. It's a great way of learning kind of the general ins and outs of the instruments and what conventionally works really well. But the Brandt methodology focuses more on color and, if you play a trumpet in this range at this dynamic with a mute, it's going to blend really well with an oboe because there are both these kind of nasal sounds, and thinking more along the lines of sound families rather than instrument families. And so that's something that I tried to explore a lot of in the piece. I think it, in some ways, is maybe not an anti orchestra piece, but a piece that is anti conventional orchestral practice.
I think it fits really well into this concert. In addition to Rainier's piece, we also have a piece by Luciano Lopez Parnetti, which is somewhat more rhythmic and minimalist. We have two older pieces by Coleridge Taylor and Mussorgsky, which are very big, romantic, from 1868 and also from 1907, I believe. So more conventional things, of course. And then Stella's piece for 18 musicians, so not a full orchestra piece. And so where this fits into the show, I think, for us, when even in rehearsal too, right? We usually come to rehearse this piece right after the big minimalist piece with all the rhythms and all these patterns and lots of sound. And then we get to this piece, and I usually tell the musicians before we start, I say, I hope that this piece is a place where we can kind of find this meditative state, kind of like yoga in a way, is where I think of it. In this piece, h.a.g.s, Countess, Báthory, there are a lot of these very quiet soundscapes and just small gestures from one instrument to another, small groups from one to another. Um, and most of it is from 4Ps to 1P, as in from very, very, very quiet to quiet. And I'm curious as to why that is. What is it about this quiet, quiet, soft sound world that appeals to you and that makes you want to bring it to our audiences?
Yeah, no, thanks for that question. Um, the short answer is kind of two pronged. One, being a little cynical, it is sort of a gimmick. Something starts quietly, people need to lean in. They're kind of like, okay, what's going to happen? Where are we going from here? And then, by kind of exhibiting a world that exists within that very, that extreme low end of the dynamic spectrum, I think that also kind of creates, because it's all relative essentially, right? Like what is really a forte versus a mezzo forte? It all, happens within the context of the piece. So you can get a spectrum, in my opinion, you can get a spectrum that feels like, pianissimo or very soft to fortissimo, very loud. Within that lower end, there's, gradations. Um, so, yeah, one, it's like maybe not cheap, but it is something that uh, asks you to maybe pay a little closer attention right from the beginning, which I think is always, you want to engage people, and there's no right way to do it necessarily, but that's what I've found is most engaging to me, and that's what I want to share with others. And I think the biggest reason for kind of living in this very soft sound world right now is um, the world is really loud, and especially if you live in a city. Like I said, I'm from New York. I did my master's in Manhattan. So it's constant noise, it's constant stimulation. And we traditionally have used the concert space as sort of a ritual space. It's um, this place that kind of exists outside of time, and outside of the world directly on the other side of those doors. And of course, there's music that explores turning the natural world into the place where that music can be experienced and everything. Um, and that's all really cool. But for me, we're just bombarded with so much information all the time, completely overstimulated. If you want anything, it's away. It's a button press away. Everything is kind of being funneled more and more and more into this idea of convenience, even if the convenience is maybe not the best thing for us. You look at like Uber Eats or something, which I don't want to get into all the issues with that, but long story short, we sacrifice, I think, connection and participation in the world around us by kind of succumbing to the shiny promise of convenience. Um, and so that, along with it's just so loud all the time, take the subway and then you go into the concert hall and then you have to sit for an hour and just kind of be shouted at by the instruments. I like not having to do that the whole time, and so if I have to be the one to do it, and there's only like 10 minutes on a concert where it is kind of very soft and introspective, that's okay. I feel like it's an opportunity, um, to maybe invite people into that world and hopefully um, to get people thinking, I think is my ultimate goal. About what is kind of up to you. That's not, uh, that doesn't concern me so much as just taking the moment to have an experience and reflect on what's going on in the music, or even just what's going on in your own life, and just kind of living in your head for a little bit and having a music sort of guide you in that, kind of, but also not really.
Nice stuff. I have a lot of thoughts. One, I really enjoy the idea of this very silent or close to silent space as a counterpoint to our increasingly chaotic daily lives. I think it's true that we have sort of found ways to push these short term gratification, dopamine, or oxytocin levers in our brains at the cost of long term things like attention span and delayed gratification and stuff like that. So I appreciate this as a statement. And, in playing this piece, again, it comes usually in rehearsal right after Luciano's piece, which is a lot more extroverted and has these big rhythms in the middle and is a lot more consistently going and going. Um, and we were talking on Tuesday, and Luciano's music is, he says, a little bit about getting people to want to dance and want to move. And then this music, I think, Countess Báthory, is more about getting people to want to find that space and relax and meditate a little bit. I have, and the other thought I had was that we, of course, we live in a city, and I was curious, something came up, which is that sometimes in that space, we will end up hearing the noise anyhow from the street. We'll hear cars beeping. We're going to hear, of course, in a John Cage 433 sense, people shifting around, of course. And one time I went to a concert in that space, and there was a protest next door against, the furs being sold by the fashion store. So I mean, this happens. That's just a fact of living in this space. But if that happened, if we heard a lot of these sounds outdoors and we're still reminded of this, middle of the city space, would that bother you, or would that be part of the scape itself?
Yeah, it definitely wouldn't bother me. I think quite often, especially when you are exploring these softer spaces, this has happened to me many times. Even if you've got like a very, for lack of a better word, dynamic piece, that is exploring a lot of different ranges of sound level and sound quality and everything, someone's phone or something falls, it never happens when there's a lot going on. It always happens at the most inopportune moment. So I think by creating a space where any moment is kind of inopportune for that, you can't really get too upset about it, because ultimately it's the ideal versus reality. Um, and I think, the performance space as this ritual space, um, regardless of what's going on outside of it, I think it does, even if things, kind of osmose through that tenuous fake barrier of the concert space between the outside world. Um, I think it's really cool. It reminds you that things are not happening in a vacuum, and if a tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound? I mean, yes, and you don't need to um, observe things for yourself to know that they're out there and real. And I think that's something that we are maybe that we get into difficult ground, because there's a lot of things that you can believe that you've never seen that isn't real as well. And I think things are getting kind of polarized along those two planes. But I don't. Maybe this is not the place to have that discussion. But to get back to the question, yeah, I think it is really rewarding to, like, I'll either lock in and be listening to the piece and just trying to engage within my own kind of meditative practice during that. Um, but it's also kind of really rewarding to take a step out of that and just be looking around the audience. And when something like a phone going off, or the red light went on for 1 second too long, so now everybody decides they need to honk at the same time. Um, Watching people kind of be taken out of that moment and then get annoyed at the sound and then go back into it. Um, it's interesting to see kind of the fruits of your labor come to pass, so to speak. And yeah, it's the outside world is always going to exist, no matter how much we try to create this space that is trying to be free of its influence. So it doesn't bother me. And a lot of the times in my music too, I will ask for sounds that may not be reliable and might not even come off in performance. And all of those things left to chance and elements of true humanity, I think, just that imperfection, having these flaws that may or may not show up, but are kind of intrinsic to everything, is really important to me.
I'll tell Isabella that about the oboe high F. The very quiet oboe high F. Now, in speaking of the audience and what they might hear, what do you hope they take away from this piece? I think, again, this is a very different kind of piece from the rest of the concert, and also really from what Horizon has done in general. All the three new pieces are very different styles than what we've gotten from our composer friends so far, and we're having fun with it. What do you hope the audience takes from this? Well, I guess we've spoken a little about it already, a little bit with finding the certain space, but I guess what do you hope they get, and is there anything you want to tell them?
To answer the second thing, no, not a single thing. I'm very, very passionate about, for myself, coming to my own conclusions and having my own experience with a piece of music. I typically don't like being told what to listen for or how to interpret things, because, just quick tangent, I don't believe music can tell a story. Purely instrumental music, I don't believe it can tell a story. It's words that tell the story. Symphonie fantastique, you give that to someone and tell them there's a story, they're not, almost certainly not going to think that the actual story that is being told in those, program or movement notes is actually what's happening. I think that asking people to come to a certain conclusion about a piece of art is not, it's just not something that I want to participate in, I guess. So what I would say, what I hope people get out of the piece is anything. I just hope there's a reaction, I think. I'm not too concerned about whether people like the music or hate the music or absolutely love it. Um, the one thing that I really try to achieve with my music is that everyone comes away with something to say about it or thinking something about it. And so I guess, to hem myself in a little, I hope people get an experience out of it. And I hope that when you listen, um, you go into it with an open mind and you are just prepared to have an experience, and whatever experience you have is valid. And there's no right way to listen to the piece, there's no right way to interpret it. um, and yeah, if you're coming to me for answers, you're not going to get them, unfortunately. The music means something specific to me. I always get asked about my titles.
Oh.
It has like there's some kind of significance, but it's pretty flimsy and esoteric, and it just feels right for me. Um,
Well, I have to apologize then because I was going to ask you about the title. I did ask him about it a few months ago, but do I 100% get it still? No. Who is Countess Bathory, and why are we wishing her to Hags? Smiley face.
yeah, so she was I believe in the 15th century, a Hungarian noble. There are these apocryphal stories of her essentially bathing in the blood of virgins to stay young. There's speculation that she contributed, to the Dracula myth and like the idea of vampires. Um, Realistically, none of that probably happened. Um, but there's this whole mythology around her. And I guess I'm sort of drawn to characters like that. There's another person who sticks in my mind a lot. There was this old baseball player, Charles Bierman. Um, and he played baseball way back in the day, like turn of the century. Um, going into the 20th century, not 25 years ago. And his whole Wikipedia page is 3 sentences. He was born, he only played a few games and he sucked, and then he died, and this is where he's buried. And those kind of things are really fascinating to me. There's a lot of figures in history that are remembered for many different things or their role in long periods of time. But then there's a lot of people that are just kind of forgotten, except for this one thing. So I guess I'm trying to channel the energy of like a singularity. Like this is a moment that exists now. And even if you are not remembered or remembered for something that most likely was not true, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't affect you once you're gone. Like legacy is something for the people who are left, not the person making it, I guess. Um, so yeah, and then I mean, as far as the hags, have a good summer. Um, I guess along these lines of thinking of, it's this person that is remembered for something that is almost certainly not true in the slightest. Um, she had a life all outside of those things and everything. Did she go to high school? Probably not. She was she was nobility. But um, I think, I guess ultimately it's just kind of funny to imagine you're flipping through your yearbook and you see have a great summer. And then, like 30 years on, when it all comes out that she is being accused of, killing innocent women and bathing in their blood, it's like, oh, wow, there's something funny about that to me. I think it's, yeah, not everything has to be so serious, even if I take my craft very seriously. I think that it's kind of I guess, a window into my soul and my personality. I love to laugh, but there's a lot of things that I'm also very, very serious about. Um, I think a lot of people will say I'm a very serious person, which I always take a little bit of offense to. Um, it's always serious before funny, which, um, but I'm happy to be considered one or the other. Ideally, both. Um, so yeah, I don't know if I totally answered the question, but those kind of questions, especially regarding titles, are hard for me because you can always. Typically, what happens is there's just a title that feels right, and then you retroactively justify it if you need to write something about it for an application or what. You say this is how the title relates to what's going on in the piece, but they kind of formulate separately and then find a cohesion, um, and that just comes from sitting with it and letting the music guide me. I feel like I'm kind of a vehicle for the ideas to develop and morph rather than I'm injecting these ideas onto the paper and manipulating them.
That's great stuff. I'm reading this novel right now called The Garden of Evening Mists by Tan Tuan Eng. It's about a Japanese garden in Malaysia. And one of the concepts they talk about is this Japanese concept of the impermanence of things, right? Mono no aware, right? This kind of awareness of the ephemerality and the temporariness of things and the capturing this moment. And I definitely feel that when we play the piece and we rehearse it. So I thank you for bringing this idea to us. I think it's very, along with the whole ideas of finding these spaces of connection and meditation together in this shared space, I think it's very important. And then, as for things that we might laugh about, there is one thing in the piece that we've been laughing about. I will not spoil it in this interview because you should come see our concert if you're watching. But I'll tell you after the interview. And if you go to the concert, I'll tell you what we laughed about in rehearsal. It's I thought it was very funny. Speaking of which, come see Visions of Youth this Sunday, November 9th at 3 o'clock in the Church of the Covenant. It's a free show. There's also a live stream, so if you're from outside of Boston, you can watch it live too. And we will be very excited to see you there. Thanks, Rainier. Thanks for showing up and having this cool chat.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Julian. Thanks for having me. Come out, support Horizon, send money, show up. They do cool stuff. I'm very fortunate to be a part of this, and I've been, following them for a while. I've been to many of their concerts, and they always, do it big and do it great. So come support.
All right. We'll see you at Visions of Youth. See you later.